Pablo loved deeply. It was in his nature. He loved purely without condition. To love someone was to make them his world. Their happiness was paramount. Their needs were his own. He would move mountains for a smile. He would sacrifice everything to see them shine. Pablo had loved and lost before. Each time he poured his entire being into loving his partner. He believed that such intensity would be met tenfold. He believed it would lead to a love that would last forever. But forever seemed to be a fleeting concept. It slipped through his fingers like grains of sand. Each heartbreak chipped away at his spirit. Yet he continued to love. He held on to the belief that one day, someone would love him with the same depth and intensity. He was destined to love completely, even if it meant a lifetime of unrequited affection. Gabriela was a ray of sunshine. Her laughter could light up a room. Pablo was captivated from the moment they met. He saw a vibrancy in her that mirrored his own capacity for love. They fell into a comfortable rhythm. Pablo, ever the giver, showered Gabriela with affection. He planned elaborate dates. He surprised her with handwritten letters and her favorite flowers. He lived for her smiles and the way her eyes sparkled when he did something that made her happy. Gabriela, in turn, appreciated his efforts. She basked in the warmth of his love. For a while, Pablo allowed himself to believe that he had found the one. He ignored the nagging feeling that something was amiss. He pushed down the fear that whispered his love was too much. He didn't want to acknowledge the subtle signs that Gabriela was slowly pulling away. He was blinded by his own yearning for a love that would last. The end, when it came, was swift and unexpected. Gabriela, with tears in her eyes, confessed that she felt suffocated. "You're too good, Pablo," she said, her voice trembling. "I need space to breathe, to figure out who I am." Pablo was devastated. He couldn't comprehend her words. How could loving someone so completely be a reason to leave? He pleaded with her to stay. He promised to change, to give her the space she needed. He would do anything to keep her. But Gabriela was resolute. She was like a bird desperate to break free from its cage. No amount of pleading could change her mind. Pablo was left alone. He was surrounded by the remnants of his love, the gifts, the photographs, the memories that haunted him. He couldn't understand why his love had pushed her away. He retreated into himself, nursing his wounds. He vowed to never love so fiercely again. Yet deep down, he knew he was only fooling himself. Years passed. Pablo, still carrying the scars of his past love, met Elena. She was an artist. Her soul was as deep and mysterious as the oceans he loved to swim in. He was drawn to her quiet intensity. He saw a reflection of his own heartache in her eyes. He vowed to tread carefully this time, to keep his love restrained. But as their love blossomed, Pablo found himself falling into familiar patterns. He couldn't help but shower Elena with the full force of his affection. He built her an art studio in his backyard, a place where she could let her creativity run wild. He spent hours listening to her talk about her art, her dreams, her fears. He was her biggest supporter, her confidant, her rock. For a while it seemed like Pablo had finally found a love that could withstand the intensity of his emotions. Elena appreciated his efforts, his unwavering support. She reveled in the security and stability he provided, but there was a part of her that remained untouched by his grand gestures. It was the part that yearned for a love that was more than just devotion. The inevitable happened. Elena, just like Gabriela before her, decided to leave. "You're too much, Pablo," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of guilt and resignation. "I need to find myself, to experience life on my own terms." Pablo was crushed. He had tried so hard to love her differently. He had tried to give her space. He had tried to learn from his past mistakes. But it seemed his efforts were in vain. His love, the very essence of who he was the very thing that drove people away. He begged Elena to reconsider. He promised to change, to be anyone she wanted him to be. He clung to her, desperate to keep her from slipping away. But Elena was gone. She left him standing amidst the ruins of their love, his heart shattered once more. He couldn't understand why history kept repeating itself. He had poured his heart and soul into these relationships. He had given his partners everything he had. Why wasn't it enough? Section 6. Sophia, a tapestry of shared passions. Years later, when Pablo had almost given up on finding a love that would last, he met Sophia. She was a writer, her words painting vivid pictures in his mind. She was different from the women he had loved before. She was independent, strong-willed, and fiercely passionate about her craft. Pablo was immediately drawn to her fire. He saw in her a kindred spirit, someone who understood the depths of his own emotions. He was cautious at first, afraid to scare her away with his intensity, but Sophia was different. She didn't shy away from his affection. She met his love with an intensity of her own. They spent hours talking, sharing their dreams, their fears, their vulnerabilities. For the first time in his life, Pablo felt seen, truly seen, for who he was. He allowed himself to believe that he had finally found someone who could handle the immensity of his love. He poured his heart and soul into their relationship. He built her a writing nook overlooking the ocean, a place where she could let her creativity soar. He was her muse, her confidant, her biggest fan. Section 7, another heartbreak, another empty canvas. But even Sophia, with her independent spirit and her fierce love, couldn't outrun the inevitable. The more Pablo loved her, the more suffocated she felt. His constant need for reassurance, his grand gestures, his unwavering devotion, began to feel like chains, binding her to a life she didn't want. "You love me too much, Pablo," she said one day, her voice heavy with sadness. "I can't breathe. I need to find my own path, to experience life without feeling like I'm constantly indebted to you." Pablo's world crumbled around him. He had tried so hard to be different, to love Sophia in a way that wouldn't scare her away. He had tried to give her the space she needed, to respect her independence. But it seemed no matter how hard he tried, his love always ended up pushing people away. He pleaded with Sophia to stay. He promised to change, to be anyone she wanted him to be. He clung to her, desperate to keep her from leaving, but Sophia, just like Gabriella and Elena before her, was gone. Section 8. The weight of unshed tears. Pablo was left alone once more. He was surrounded by the ghosts of his past loves, their memories haunting his every waking moment. He couldn't understand why he was cursed to love so deeply. Why was the very essence of who he was, the very thing that made him special, the very thing that drove people away? He had spent his life searching for a love that would last, a love that could withstand the intensity of his emotions. But it seemed like such a love was not meant for him. He was destined to love and lose, to pour his heart and soul into relationships that were doomed from the start. The weight of his unshed tears threatened to drown him. He had loved and lost, so many times that he was starting to lose himself in the process. He had given his partners everything he had, and yet, it was never enough. He was left with nothing but a broken heart and a profound sense of loneliness. Section 9. A solitary symphony of love. Pablo continued to love. He loved deeply and purely, just as he always had. He loved the sunrise and the sunset. He loved the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. He loved the feel of the sand beneath his feet. He loved the laughter of children playing in the park. He loved the world around him, even though it seemed the world couldn't love him back. He knew that his love was a gift, even if it was a gift that brought him nothing but pain. Pablo's love was a solitary symphony, a beautiful melody played on heartstrings that no one else could hear. He continued to search for a love that would last, a love that could withstand the intensity of his emotions. But deep down he knew that even if he never found it, his capacity for love would remain unchanged. He was destined to love, and that was both his blessing and his curse.